Christine Schneider, the visceral voice.
Welcome to the Visceral Voice Podcast. I'm your host, Christine Schneider. Through this podcast, I aim to bring you the most current, up-to-date research on voice science, function, pain science, movement, and everything in between. I am on a quest to learn everything I can about the living, breathing body and its intricate connection to the voice. This podcast documents the continuation of my learning and my experience as a professional singer, a nutritional consultant, a movement specialist, and a manual therapist. Join us as we strive to provide current, knowledgeable, creative, and compassionate information to help you restore, regain, and create happiness and success on your vocal journey. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I am so excited to have you here for today's conversation on hypermobility in the voice. Alien is my guest today. He is a certified modern vocal training coach and a regional mentor for the Balkan area. He's from Slovenia. He has completed a vocal massage therapy course with Stephen King and Robert Price, which he uses along with his teaching skills to help students in his studio and regularly at the European Vocal Camp. Being hypermobile himself, his curiosity about hypermobility affects the voice, or how hypermobility affects the voice, has prompted him to research the subject as part of his Level 3 Advanced Vocal Coach Training course. I was introduced to Alien's work through my dear friend Janet, who saw him speak at a conference and said, I found someone who is talking about hypermobility in the voice. So I reached out, and Alien, I am so thrilled that you are willing to be here and have this conversation with me today. Thank you so much, and welcome to the Visceral Voice Podcast.
Hi, Christine. I'm so thrilled to be here, to get the invitation, to get the chance to talk about this topic, which I think is really important and it's not well known about. So raising awareness is one of my goals. Mm-hmm. And I just have to correct you on the pronunciation. In Slovenian, it's Alien.
Alien. Thank you. Yes, please correct me on that, on that pronunciation. Okay, Alien. Great.
Yep.
Thank you. So, Alien, will you please let us know, how did you come into the work that you are doing now? What was your journey into this work, and especially into this work with hypermobility of the voice?
So I have not found out that I am hypermobile until maybe 3 years ago. So it's really recent. Mm-hmm. I had a few situations that it came about. I know I was I knew I was flexible. So I can stretch some of my limbs really far, more than normal people, but I didn't think nothing of it. Mm-hmm. Until I went to a vocal coach and breathing coordination practitioner called Barbara Tanze in Slovenia, and she was checking the mobility of my ribs, right? Mm. And she was touching, palpating, and she said, "Oh, you got really mobile ribs. Are you hypermobile?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know, maybe." Mm. And then when I did my certification for laryngeal massage, mm-hmm. There was one of the teachers, Robert Price, was palpating my larynx. So he was going like this, and he went, "Oh my gosh, that's the most movable larynx I had all year. Are you hypermobile?" And then it maybe started to click. Well, I guess I am. And since I was started coaching being a vocal coach, well, I noticed I had some issues in my voice that like couldn't get resolved through normal vocal coaching, or stuff was really inconsistent. So I try to get as much information as I can to learn about if it affects the voice, if it's even a thing, right? And then I got a chance to do a research project for my teacher certification training, and I chose the topic because I really wanted to know more about it, and I got quite a lot of responses from teachers all over the world sharing their experiences with hypermobile students, or sharing their stories because some of them are hypermobile as well.
How many people were involved in that study?
I had 40 responses.
Mm-hmm. Great. So I know that we'll get more into some of that information and what you learned through that research. But if you could kind of give us an overview of what hypermobility is, or how it looks, or what it looks like in the voice. What does hypermobility look like? How could a voice teacher kind of think, maybe this student is hypermobile?
Well, I'd say the first thing to look out for, because it's really obvious, how somebody is standing.
Mm-hmm.
Where do their knees go? Can they really lock them out and just, it doesn't look natural, right? Some of them can really bend back. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the first clue. But of course, when dealing with the voice, we know that hypermobility impacts, so the range could be extended. Not saying that it's always the case, but the range could be really abnormal, but really high voices, and also very inconsistent. So you can have a student and you work with them for a period of time and all seems well, and then all of a sudden they come in and it looks like all the progress has been lost. And if you rule out other factors and there's nothing left, you're just not sure what's going on. And I know that some vocal coaches would then just try to get rid of the student and just refer them to somebody else because they don't know how they can help them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that, well, first of all, I'm like, wow, maybe I'm hypermobile. But actually, I do have some hypermobility. In movement, we can tell so much from asking someone to just reach towards their toes, because if they palm the floor, and if, as you mentioned, they hyperextend their knees, and we're looking at someone who has some hypermobility. So that's...
Or we have, if they can do this, right? If they can bend their thumb to their...
I can even bend it backwards. So I knew that my thumbs were hypermobile. I have to watch that in my manual therapy. And that's a big thing with someone who's hypermobile, is making sure that they're not continuously going to end range, because that end range is very much beyond, it's going to the point of laxity of ligament, as opposed to staying within a range that is still healthy and normal for the joints.
And on that subject, because the voice also has a range of movement, the larynx can go up and down, and there are some arguments that singers who are hypermobile shouldn't extend their voices often, or I'd say not trying to put more vocal effort in those higher ranges. that could be leads to damage quite quickly, right?
Wow. Wow. Yeah. That's, and that's so challenging with the demands of the industry today, where they're expected to sing so many different styles of music and, not just be a triple threat between dance and singing and acting, but to be a triple threat as a singer, in a sense, where you have to sing pop music and you have to sing, classical music theater, and you have to sing rock music, you have to sing all of these different styles. Oh my gosh.
And by the way, here's another indication, because if somebody is a dancer, that's also kind of a higher chance that they could be.
Yeah, a higher likelihood of hypermobility. Yeah, for sure. And of course, a lot of our students, and for me, a lot of my clients also dance. That's part of that triple threat. So, how common would you say, or I guess, would you kind of guess, or maybe you were able to see a little bit through some of your research, how common is hypermobility? And what are some of the signs and symptoms that someone might be experiencing hypermobility in their voice?
Yeah, so at this point, I'd like to kind of make a classification, because there is a kind of a range regarding hypermobility, if it how it affects everything, not only the voice, because it can't be only the voice. So we know that there is asymptomatic hypermobility, kind of benign, which affects a lot of it's 10 to 20% of the population actually has at least maybe one hypermobile joint. And so that can become later on in the life symptomatic. So things start to hurt. There may be some other, like, more systemic issues going on, not only musculoskeletal. So we kind of go from one end that it's really not doing any harm to, okay, we have some problems, and then we have things like EDS, right? Or Marfan syndrome or Down syndrome as well, that are really affecting the whole body, causing a lot of pain and problems, right?
Yeah, sure. What specific challenges do you feel that individuals with hypermobility face when it comes to vocal function?
So, based on the research I did, the responses were, well, for sure, the wide range, as we talked about. It could be, not always, but there could be the voices just, I had one female singer said, oh, she could jump from tenors to alto, soprano, wherever they needed her, right? Really easily. And also it ties in with the flexibility. So kind of doing riffs and runs could be really easy. But there are also, so the positive, and a person can have only the positive effects. It's asymptomatic, so they could do really amazing stuff with their voice, and that's all fine and dandy. But so maybe later in life, if they're not careful, problems can occur, and then they're just not sure why, right? Is it because of vocal misuse, or there are some other stuff going on? So we know that it's a huge inconsistency in how those symptoms come up. So one day you might be fine, and the next day you're not sure what's going on. So there's really a lot of reports of volume issues, like and breath control is a huge one. So getting there, on one hand, some report that they have really big voices. They can produce volume really easily, but which is hard to control.
Mhm.
On the other hand, you have some that cannot produce huge sounds, especially when in the upper registers.
Mhm. Would we want to be mindful of, so just like from a biomechanical lens, we want to be mindful of pushing end range. And you had mentioned being mindful of doing high end, low, like high range, low range. Would teachers want to also be mindful of having someone push that volume and being at that extreme volume where they don't feel like they can have control?
Yeah, for sure. I'd say the number one thing they have to be careful about is how how long they are producing those sounds.
Mm-hmm.
There's really there's huge advocacy for doing shorter lessons, for
Mm-hmm.
especially with dealing with high pressures and high and powerful sounds. Because you just can't stay in that configuration for a long time. And talking about professional singers doing musical theater shows, or 2 hours every other day, it's a huge problem.
Mm-hmm.
And some people just rather not go into those areas of being a professional singers because they know that they can't handle the demands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the demands are extreme. 8 shows a week of Broadway is a really intense schedule. My longest run was 3 years, and we were taking care of our voices more than anyone who has never done it could ever possibly know. Our entire life for those 3 years was voice care and taking care of our voices, and how much voice use did we have throughout the day before our performances and in between performances. And so there's a lot for sure that needs to go into it. Are there certain populations or demographics that are more prone to hypermobility affecting the voice? You mentioned probably dancers, gymnasts.
For sure.
I don't know, maybe even martial artists, people who grow up moving with a lot of mobility, flexibility.
Yeah. I mean, because they are hypermobile, they can easily get into those kind of fields, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, people just probably call it, oh, you're naturally talented because of that, I'd say. But yeah, like the demographics show that women, for sure, so assigned at birth, are much more likely to be hypermobile. And maybe that's why there's so many dancers and singers.
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah.
Can you explain some of the physiological mechanisms behind how hypermobility can impact the vocal cords and overall vocal performance?
Right. So, talking about hypermobility, I'd say there's kind of two things. We know that, especially when we get into HSD, so hypermobility spectrum disorder, which is symptomatic, and especially the EDS versions, which is a genetic disease that affects the collagen.
Right.
So a weak or defective collagen production. And especially, it's really prominent when talking about the Down syndrome, people with Down syndrome, because they're they are like born with from birth they have problems even speaking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so we know that the upper layers of the especially the superficial lamina propria is collagen. It's mostly made out of
Mm-hmm.
collagen. So if that collagen is weak, we can see how things like um, overuse, misuse can affect the folds, and it can lead to pathologies like uh, vocal nodules or polyps, edemas, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd say there's a higher chance, right, for that to happen with
Mm-hmm.
hypermobile people.
Sure. Yeah, I often in my clinic, people will talk about, well, first of all, there's more pathology in elite singers than we know, or than the general population knows. I mean, if you're an elite athlete at something, you are more likely to have some kind of injury. Um, but I'll often hear in my clinic people talk about, someone else has cords of steel. Why don't I? Why is it so challenging? Why is it so
Right, right.
difficult? Why is my voice inconsistent? And so this is interesting that who knows, maybe there's a little bit of hypermobility at the foundation of some of that for probably many of our singers. What do you feel are some of the misconceptions and misunderstandings about hypermobility and its connection to voice issues?
Well, Christine, talking about this is most teachers don't even know it's a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, the misconceptions, well, I hope we will have them some in the future, But really, I think it's just the same. I think it's the same if you talk about dancers, because it's probably, oh wow, you can stretch your limbs really far. Wow, you have a high range, and that's about it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, it's true, but then probably how it affects, how it can lead to damage is not really understood well, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sure. I mean, I have a number of people that I know who had started professionally dancing at a very young age. And I grew up as a figure skater first. Talk about a young career. Figure skating is a very young career where if you're not in the Olympics by the time you're 16, you're probably not going to go. And I have a number of dancers that I know who danced professionally at a very young age who were done by the time it was time to go to college. They didn't even have to go to college to get a degree in dancing because their bodies were saying no more of this. The injury rate is quite remarkable, and especially when we're looking at hypermobile shows like something like Cirque du Soleil. I mean, part of my job is to help someone get through their performances as pain-free as possible. Because I don't want to train them out of being able to work in the field that they want to work in. So I certainly want them to be able to do the performances and the shows and jobs that they want to do. I have to help them try to do it as pain-free as possible for as long as they can, with the understanding that those kind of that kind of mobility and those kind of tricks probably won't be something that the body can continue to do for a long period of time. It's not something that they're going for longevity. It has a timeline on it.
And when talking about longevity with singers, the few research papers that exist, so they show that problems. I mean, when talking about vocal problems, pathology, stuff like that. In the general population, I think there's a statistic that 45% of like singers, I think it was done between college students. So 45% of them have vocal problems. And when they did the research with hypermobile singers, that percent was 74. So
of college students, college-age students?
Of professional singers.
Of professional singers. That level was 74. Wow.
So that's huge. I mean, I don't think you can disregard that kind of that statistic, right?
Yeah. Wow.
And so the argument is, I mean, they say that voice-related issues in people who are hypermobile can occur 20 to even 30 years earlier than general population.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, of course, that prevents people to get into like doing professional work, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we see a lot of students going through high school and maybe even college who have a dream of doing it and then maybe get a diagnosis of EDS and they start questioning whether or not they're going to be able to reach those dreams or those goals, which, just to the listeners, if you haven't watched Eloise episode a few weeks ago on EDS, please go ahead and watch it. It's a really great episode. And Eloise mentions that it takes often at least 10 years for someone to get a diagnosis of hypermobility and of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So people are searching and in some pretty chronic pain for a long time before they actually get a diagnosis, which when I heard, I'm not surprised because I've seen a number of people, and some people I know have gone way longer than that. I mean, 30 plus years of searching and finally get a diagnosis, or have one doctor saying, I think you have EDS, and then another doctor is saying, no, I don't think you have EDS, So.
Well, when I went to my practitioner, general doctor, she was like, "What? Hypermobility? I don't know where I can get that."
Yeah. Where do I get that information? Are there any particular techniques or exercises that you think are helpful for individuals with hypermobility to help them manage or improve their vocal function? And are there exercises that should be avoided, like common vocalises that a lot of teachers are teaching that maybe you don't want to do with someone who is hypermobile?
Yeah, so what we know about the physiology, about larynx and how it works regarding hypermobility, there is a problem because things are so lax. Sometimes people can get a problem adducting their folds, right? So just bringing them together, and so that can result in hoarseness, raspiness, stuff like that. And they just can't get a proper connection of the chords. And of course, what do? They try to just force it out, push, use extrinsic muscles, or force. And I'd say that's the same, just even in movement. Things get stiff really fast in order to compensate for a structural problem, or in this case, the laxity that's going on. So anything that's really, driving the subglottal pressure, you need to be careful about it, I think. So what's the common, the goo-goo-goos, stuff like that. Everything that creates a flood of subglottal pressure not to be avoided, but you really careful with it. Don't try to do like 15 minutes of it, probably. Well, a recommendation for sure is SOVTs. But again, if you're doing something like a straw in water phonation, just to make sure that the pressure isn't really large, right? Start small and just trying to get a balanced onset going is, I think, the main challenge. Because, you know, people, when they figure out, when they see that they're struggling from one extreme, they go to the other, and then they become really quiet and yeah. So talking about if you're talking about vocalists, I'm for sure a huge proponent of SOVTs. But for sure we can, well, just being aware of the breath of the breath pressure, right? Not trying to push everything out. So I'm a huge fan of singing with using monitors, microphones, getting that auditory perception better, so singers don't need to use force, right?
Yeah, that's I had the opportunity to watch Matt Edwards teach at the Voice Conference last year, and he's at Shenandoah, and even in a workshop, he has people experience what it's like to sing on microphone and off microphone. And I hadn't actually ever seen that in a workshop before, where, once you sing it live, you're then put on a microphone to see, like, how much do you actually really need here? And it was great. It was a really fascinating workshop that I was very excited to participate or be able to watch and learn from. I work with SOVTE a lot as well, and so we'll mention with Alien just mentioned the amount of pressure if you're working with a straw in water. Part of that is making sure that you only come about an inch into the water. If we come too far down into the water, it adds more pressure. You can do that as a tool for something maybe a little higher. But ultimately, we just want to come about an inch into the water. And when we take the straw out, we want to make sure that that straw continues to buzz. So a few things that my dear friend Wendy LeBourne had taught me about some SOVTs in a class that I had her come in and teach. So if you are someone who does straw work and it's not working for you, there might just be some modifications and tweaks that could be made to help them work for you more. And there might be other options for you as well. So I know I have a number of clients who have tried straw exercises and they're like, I don't know what's happening. I'm getting so tight. And so I just wanted to mention that because if that is you, don't stress, you're not alone, and there are always options.
Yeah, I forgot to mention one thing. I became a huge fan of doing tongue work, like really engaging the tongue. And for the listeners, please check out Carrie Obert. I'm a huge fan. She does a tongue-centric pedagogy, right? And I think it makes a lot of sense because she redirects the tension, letting the tongue do most of the work, and just creating more resistance. So it's using all kind of funny voices like this, and trying to bring the tongue back and you create resistance. So or just like this kind of sound, right? Getting the tongue involved and preventing just the air to escape, and the vocal folds to work more than needed, right?
Yeah, I don't know her work. I'll have to check it out. I love studying the tongue. I love the anatomy of the tongue. I love the neurology of the tongue. It connects with 5 different areas of the brain. It has a huge relationship with motor control. So I work with the tongue a lot, and I'll check her work out. I think that's awesome and fascinating. In what ways do you feel like hypermobility impacts a professional life or an individual's life who rely on their voice for work, such as a singer, an actor, or even public speakers, lawyers, sports broadcasters?
Well, I think we talked about how it affects the whole functions and how it can put stress on the voice and leading to pathologies faster than normal people, right? Quote unquote. But there's also if you talk about like the social and psychological factors involved. Anxiety is a huge deal. People who have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder,
ADHD.
much more likely to be hypermobile.
Mm.
Which I find interesting, and I'm not quite sure how it works, the comorbidities, but I can imagine that if people are, not sure about their how their bodies work, or just not feeling normal all the time and having huge pain day to day, for sure the anxiety comes in.
I didn't know that with ADHD and hypermobility. That's really interesting. I do find that I won't say everyone, but almost everyone I work with who's hypermobile has it's a challenge to have interoceptive awareness, and which is part of why there's a beyond end range that happens in hypermobility. So if if you're not entirely sure where end range is and you just go beyond it, but a lot of times when trying to help someone feel something in a drill or anything like that, someone who's more hypermobile will have a little bit more challenge with that. So sometimes being able to bring in some exteroceptive awareness first can kind of help someone be able to come more interoceptive.
Yeah, I agree 100% for sure. Just getting them. And here's another thing: the fastest way I know of how to get somebody like out of their thinking patterns is just use movement with anything, like any singing exercise you can think of, whatever, just the whole song. Just use some form of movement.
Yeah. Well, I love that you're saying that, because that's so many of my programs are getting singers to know that singing is full body, and to have a physical warm up and a vocal warm up, and then combining the two where we might be in actual movement drills while we're singing that we know are high payoff drills for us. So yes, I love that.
I mean, I have a student. She's kind of like a case study for me. I asked her, "Can I just try anything on you?" And she goes, "Yeah, yes, please." We did all sorts of things. First, we started out with manual therapy with laryngeal massage, and that was okay for her. It relaxed her and everything, and it did show some improvement in the voice. But what really got her going was doing jumping jacks or squats or anything, and then sing, and when she did like 45 minutes of that, she said to me, she told me, well, it feels like something just something unlocked. I mean, I could put the energy out and some part of the muscles switched off. And I guess that's the kind of philosophy of, because we know that if one muscle is doing all the work, well, if you use your whole body and then the muscle that works can just chill for a while, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Thinking of more of the whole, more of the neuromyofascial web instead of an isolation of an activation of just one muscle. So, yeah. Do you know, are there any treatments or therapies that have been shown effective in addressing hypermobility related voice issues?
Well, not really. The whole thing about movement and I'd say, well, effective therapies. Yeah. So the thing about like manual therapy and well, yeah, here there's an argument that people should be careful about that because the larynx can like dislocate or subluxate. So really careful about that one, I'd say. But it really does help people just to get the nervous system calmed down and get them out of the fight or flight response.
Yeah.
So they can feel normal. I mean, they can get into a relaxed state.
Yeah. And I think that would be it. Any therapies that help with a regulation of the nervous system, like craniosacral therapy, some manual therapy. With hypermobility, we have to be mindful with hands-on therapy, just because there are comorbidities that some cranial cervical instability. So working around the base of the head, so the occipital cranial base, those are all like working around the suboccipitals, which is a big area for people to go. That's an area we have to be really mindful of with hypermobile people because they're trying to create a balance there. So just going in there can destabilize. So it's really being mindful to help with the nervous system and not destabilize someone from releasing areas very quickly in those joints that they are trying to help stabilize. And with movement, it's kind of coming into some nice controlled, movement, turning on proprioception, turning on the muscles. So kind of slower, more controlled motion, I think can be really impactful. So all of those that just really help regulate the nervous system. Yeah.
I mean, I'm a huge fan of the Alexander technique, especially regarding the neck, because that's that's the thing they go for, and stuff like Tai Chi or Qigong, really slow, controlled movements. I know it helps me personally, so yeah, I would advocate for those kind of things.
Yeah. How can individuals with hypermobility work with voice professionals or therapists to develop strategies for managing the vocal challenges that you were talking about and the inconsistencies?
Right. So if we're talking about awareness, right? So my goal would be to just bring this out to voice coaches, singing teachers, just that they know that it's a thing, right? And if they spot somebody, just try to talk to them if they have any pain. What's their kind of history with their body, essentially, right? If somebody, well, here's a tricky one, because if somebody knows that they're hypermobile and have problems with their voice, and they come to a vocal coach who doesn't know what to do, so well, it's really hard to find. I know there's one vocal. She specializes in EDS and is a vocal coach and also manual therapist, based from London, Georgia Mel.
Mm.
If anybody is like in that area, I think she's the one to see. But I think I have only one name for you.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
challenge right now is, as I mentioned before we started actually recording, when I was at the Voice Foundation last year, I had 5 different people at different times come up to me and say, can you talk about hypermobility and the voice on your podcast? Can you find someone to talk about? So voice teachers are wanting it. They're knowing that this is a thing that they want to be mindful of. And of course, they want to help people with and through. But there's just not a lot of information yet on, and there's not a lot of people who are specifically working with and specifically researching how hypermobility impacts and influences the voice.
Yeah, Christine, I mean, there's only one paper I know of when I did the research.
Mm.
It's Tracy Jeffrey from 2021, specifically talking about voice and hypermobility. And that's it. She
Mm.
did mention, she did mention research was going on, but yeah, we don't know. I don't know what it's all about.
Yeah, where it is in the research and what the research is. Yeah. Yeah, and that's incredible knowing that the demographics that we work with, many of them are hypermobile throughout their body, throughout their tissue. So how could it not influence what's happening at the voice? So to gain more awareness, I think is really important. It's obviously because it's why I found you from across the world to have this conversation.
And you know, honestly, I know you did a podcast with Ron. Rust.
Fresca. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and I'm a huge fan of the PRI thing. Please, everybody, go listen to that podcast. I mean, that's the most sense everything made to me. Of out of everything we talk about, how we can help people is just getting the breath pressure management under,
Mm-hmm.
be aware of that and how it affects posture and neck positions. And if these things align, and then we can breathe normally, and then the breathing helps to stabilize the spine and everything. And if you're hypermobile, that's, I'm sure you want that. I mean, it's
Yeah, the foundation of all of it. Yeah. Is that pressure, or that's the foundation of where I begin with everyone is pressure management. Can you manage pressure, and can you find a stacked position so that your rib cage can truly be over your pelvis? Can you find that? And then can you have a pendulum swing from that and be able to alternate through sides or alternate from one hemisphere of the body to the other?
Yeah, I mean, if there's a lot of talk, especially in the few couple of decades, with breath management, breath pressure regarding the vocal folds, and research going on about that.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other hand, the breath pressure like under the vocal folds. But I haven't seen so much that ties the both kind of parts like together, and that could be very like disciplinary thing.
Mm.
More vocal coaches to get involved with what you're doing specifically, and Ron with the PRI.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah. Well, we have Chris Kelly and I run a company called Performance Movement Restoration, where we're teaching voice teachers to implement these movement drills into the voice studio. So they're not the same drills as PRI, but they have the influence for sure of PRI because we both have studied with Ron. So he's certainly a huge part of what influences our movement training.
Right. I mean,
So
sorry. I know the next step for me, trying to learn ways how to help hypermobile people, will be doing some kind of training in that and learning specific techniques and trying them out and just recording them, and maybe someday I'll get a research paper out. I'd like
yes. Yes, we will be looking for that research paper. So are there lifestyle factors and habits that might exacerbate or alleviate the impact of hypermobility on the voice?
Well, yeah, for sure. Everything we talk about regarding vocal hygiene with every singer applies, I think, double or triple to hypermobile voices.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we generally need to practice good hygiene, vocal hygiene, but especially, because also there's a huge, talking about reflux or gastro GI problems is also quite prevalent. So be especially mindful about that. And post-nasal drip as well seems to be a huge factor here. Getting medication for that, if you're a vocal coach, talk about with your students, if they have those problems, right, and how they can alleviate them. But yeah, in food management and stuff like that, I'd say everybody should be mindful, but especially hypermobile.
Mm-hmm. What are some, you've mentioned some of the comorbidities, and I'm just curious if there are any more. You mentioned comorbidity of ADHD, and then you just mentioned postnasal drip, and
Yeah.
are there other specific comorbidities that someone with hypermobility might have related?
Oh yeah, well yeah, we talked about the POTS. So that's the tachycard, the postural. Yeah, I forgot, but that's more tied to EDS, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also HASD, but more when moving toward EDS. I know allergic reactions are also a huge factor, like MAST or MCAS. That could be a huge problem, and the acid reflux, and then especially for exacerbating factors, and especially regarding to women, hormones. Dealing with all of that is kind of ties into the secondary causes going on, what exacerbates.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Alien, for coming on and having this conversation with me today. I just butchered your name again, didn't I?
No, yeah, I think
it came out quickly. And Alien, right?
Yeah, Alien, perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having this conversation. I hope that in, the next few years, hopefully, we can see some of this research come out. We will be looking for it. Thank you for the work that you're doing in just kind of trying to spread the word and get the word out there that hypermobility, especially in specificity with the voice, is a thing, and it's something that we want to look out for and help our students with. So thank you for the work that you're doing in the field, and we hope to see more of it in the future. And thank you so much for being here and having this conversation with me today.
I mean, Christine, thank you so much. You're the one that's you're doing the heavy lifting, I'd say, trying to find people and getting stuff out there. That's huge, and I would just love to see some more podcasts, more interviews on those matters, and I hope you can find the people to do it.
Yes, me too. You've given me a couple ideas already today, so I have to jot the names down.
Okay, cool. Yeah, perfect.
Thank you all for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, tell your colleagues, students, and friends. Subscribe, rate, and please write a review. You can find us on Instagram or Facebook, and feel free to check out my website at www.thevisceralvoice.com for information on programs and upcoming events. I hope you join us next time for another wonderful conversation on the Visceral Voice.